Now, wandering around the Melbourne Motor Show, we got a little homesick when we saw WA Little Creatures beer in front of this Italian-looking supercar. And we soon found out that our WA beer was helping to launch this exciting supercar. Now, we've seen this Supra V8 before on Grant's Tech Talk. Let's see what else can be done with them. We're going to speak to Nick Tompkinson, who fled WA to build an Aussie beast. Tell us a bit about this weapon.
Well, this is a car, it was basically a dream of mine, Kane. I've always wanted to build a car that was my own design. I love the engines. We use them at Carbon Tech. We put them in our Lamborghini replicas. Fantastic engine. Our goal is to get over 400 horsepower, normally aspirated at this stage. We will develop later a twin turbo engine, and I think the sky's the limit there from what I've read. The car itself is basically a vehicle that we're using to promote Australian business to the world's media here at the International Motor Show in Melbourne.
How much does she weigh?
The car, our projected figure is 800 kilos, and we have a little over 400 horsepower in the engine behind us. We're aiming at a 2 to 1 horsepower per kilo ratio.
And when do you think she'll be up and driving?
If you're at the motor show at this time next year, you'll see the car. We'll either drive it in or trailer it in, but our goal is to have a fully functioning demonstrator that we can take around Australia to advertise the Australian companies that are involved next year.
And what sort of performance figures are we looking at for this weapon?
Well, this car we've built to be a supercar, and in order for it to be a supercar, we must exceed 320 kilometres an hour, and we must do 0 to 100 in less than 4 seconds.
And how are you going to keep this beast on the road?
Well, it'll have fully inboard, fully adjustable suspension, a la Formula One car. It's ground affected, front and rear, with a fully adjustable rear wing.
Well, Nick, that's a very impressive car. We'll look forward to watching the progress over the coming year as this little Aussie spider bites back. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
When you first jump into the Supra, the first thing you realise is that it seems to be a driver's car and built for the driver. The dashboard is resemblant of a cockpit, and everything is angled at a way that points directly at the driver, from the speedo and tacho to the air conditioning controls. It all faces the driver in a way that almost excludes the front seat passenger. I do like all the storage compartments up front here, but I wouldn't recommend going away for the weekend. Firstly, you won't be taking anyone with you because there's no room on those back seats. And secondly, you won't be taking anything with you because the boot is tiny and fits practically nothing in it. Like a lot of Japanese cars, this Supra is quoted to have 206 kilowatts at 5,600 RPM. Now, you hear about quite a few Japanese cars like the STI, etc., also having 206 kilowatts. What the Japanese companies are doing is underquoting their real power figures because of Japanese vehicle regulations. We had this one on the dyno and it generated 278 rear wheel horsepower. Now that's closer to 230 kilowatts at the flywheel. The Supra's torque figures are probably a little closer to home. It generates 430 newton meters of torque at 3,600 RPM. And that's pretty low in the rev range. And the reason for that is that the Supra runs an inline 6-cylinder twin turbo engine. Now these two turbos are not the same size. One of them hangs off 3 of the pistons and is considerably smaller than the turbo that hangs off the other 3 pistons. So what that translates to is that at around about 2,000 RPM, you can feel the first turbo spinning up and giving you boost. Then, once that one runs out of puff, at about 4,000 RPM, you feel the second one kick in. And that's the turbo that spools up high in the rev range and gives you those real top-end power figures. I haven't met many people yet who don't like the Supra's classic sports car appearance. The long bonnet is counterbalanced by the fat rear end, which makes the Supra's styling reminiscent of a 1960s sports car like the E-Type Jag. But Toyota looked to the Italians rather than the British for tips on an ideal sports car's dimensions, for the Supra is actually based on a Ferrari 550 Maranello. The Ferrari is 10 centimetres wider, 3 centimetres longer, and only 2 millimetres taller than the Supra. These similarities are so close that they are clearly not a coincidence, and the only obvious physical difference is the Ferrari's 5.5 litre V12 engine. I also really love the Supra's 6-speed gearbox. Because it's a 6-speed, you just watch the tacho fly to redline before you have to snap it into another gear straight away. It's good fun to have to use the gears that much, and it also makes the acceleration so much more staggering because you've got those shorter gears. Well, you know where we are. We haven't been here for a couple of weeks, but we're going to take this guy out and see how he really handles on the race car test circuit. The car's handling is impressive. Shocks are Bilsteins as standard, and the 16-inch rims come equipped with two 3.5s on the front and two 5.5s on the rear, which gives the Supra quite an impressive amount of grip. But even these fat tyres are no match for the big 3-litre twin-turbo, which will quite comfortably send those big boots into an easy, but not very smooth, power oversteer. Unfortunately, if the oversteer is pushed by keeping the power down, this will see the front wheels join the slide towards the curb. And if the driver succumbs by backing off on the throttle, this will induce the rear end to violently snap back into line. These two problems mean that although the Supra can be a lot of fun when the electronic traction control is turned off, it is not the drift classic that you might expect from a high-powered rear-wheel drive coupe, and it certainly isn't anything of the calibre of the drift warrior that Nissan have produced in all of their Silvia models. Usually, when we talk about modifying any Japanese turbo engine, half the secret is upping the boost. But in the case of the Supra, the sequential turbos do not respond well to a boost increase. Firstly, it's hard to achieve effectively, as the smaller turbo doesn't have a wastegate. And secondly, having two aggressive power peaks through the rev range does not make for very pleasant driving. The smart option is to get rid of the sequential turbo system altogether and fit two equal sized turbos or one large one. The good news as far as power upgrades are concerned is that Toyota's 3-litre 6 is an incredibly strong engine and will comfortably handle a large turbo and high boost levels without needing to strengthen the internals. Well, Toyota Supra. It's a classic of the imports and it's shaped up to be a classic car all round. And if I've talked you into it so much in this road test that you've just got to get your hands on one, well guess what? This one's for sale. It's in pristine shape, so if you're interested, email us at supra@raceguard.com.au or call this number on your screen right now and we'll give you all the details. But until then, I'll see you next week for the road test.